Steven turned down a $100 million deal, even though the CEO only made $20 million in 2024. In this video, I'm going to tell you the 3 growth drivers that gave Steven the confidence to do this, with a bonus point at the end. So if you're first in your family or community to build or lead a business, this is for you. Welcome to First Gen, and this is the Creator Entrepreneur series where I break down and highlight the real companies that creators have built. Now, before we get started, let's take it back a bit into how the CEO even got started. And it started as a tiny side project for Steven, where he was recording episodes solo. And the main idea was that he wanted to get inside the minds of CEOs. It wasn't until 2019 where he actually launched on YouTube and started his channel. And then in 2024, he launched Flight Studio, which was really looking at how can they actually deploy the CEO playbook into new podcast shows. Now, where is the CEO today? Well, they have approximately 13 million subscribers on YouTube and over 1 billion views. And they also have over 1 billion streams across streaming platforms and was the first UK produced podcast to actually hit that across all the streaming platforms. So, incredible job. Now, let's not lie. Steven obviously had an audience before he started the CEO from his social chain days. And that definitely was an advantage for him. It enabled him to get really good guests when he started. It gave him a platform to already launch from. But he also deployed a lot of other strategies that were really successful and allowed the CEO to get to where it is today. And some of these growth drivers is what I'm going to dive into in today's video. So let's get started. So firstly, he treats the podcast like a media company and not like a show. The CEO built an ecosystem around itself with live shows and speaking engagements, physical products like the conversation cards and the 1% diary. They also have the Behind the Diary channel, as well as also the paid ad-free tier as well. This meant that there were so many touch points for its audience that ultimately fed discovery to the main show itself. Now, this works because more doors in equals more discoveries. The clips captured the casuals, the Behind the Diary was able to build trust with its audience, and then also their products lived in the real world. Now you can see this in the conversation cards and how this all loops back into the main show. So for example, the conversation cards was also part of the CEO ritual, which was the last guest question. And the product also included a QR code that literally fed back into the show. Also, the 1% diary operationalizes the whole concept around getting 1% better every day into a 90-day diary. So building that ecosystem meant that ultimately his audience was going to see him regardless. And I think there's a saying where you need to be seen 7 times before somebody actually buys into your brand. They do that really well with all these different touch points. Secondly, they made failure and experiment a muscle inside the team. Steven talks about a failure and experimentation team and a culture of rapid tests. And he hired Grace Miller, whose job was to increase the rate of controlled experiments, testing things like thumbnails, titles, formats. And it wasn't just a slogan. It was an organizational structure and a role. This works because it was learning over one-off wins. They discover winners earlier, and they also bin the weak ideas even quicker. It also de-romanticizes content and makes you focus on just shipping, testing, and iterating quickly. And an example of them actually focusing on that experimentation is their data and proprietary tools. Thirdly, they use production as an engine, not as a cost center. The CEO does long cinematic YouTube videos and then chops them up into smaller clips for Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, which loops videos back into the full episode. This pillar, clips, and companion feed system compounds and ultimately increases reach. They basically industrialized editing and packaging, which makes every episode feel premium and travels well across platforms. This works because cinematic multi-camera video does really well on YouTube and has a higher completion. So this ultimately increases the recommendation velocity. They also have fast turnaround, which lets them capitalize on guest news cycles while attention is the hottest. And they also have consistent packaging, such as titles and thumbnails and intro pacing, which means that there's not a lot of variation to confuse the algorithm. Now, this industrialization of editing and packaging means that they can also bring on board higher tier sponsors. Sponsors want to see a clean brand so they can buy with confidence. And lastly, for the bonus point, we have the AI assisted spin-offs. You can already tell that Stephen likes to be innovative and really try new things. They are currently testing AI voice and animation, and this will increase the amount of content that they can produce without burning the core brand. So what does this all mean as a first-gen founder or leader? Well, firstly, you need to find a pathway to profitability as quickly as possible so that you can maintain ownership, but then also determine the action that you want to take as a brand. We've seen an example of this with the Amicol brand, where they brought on investors early and investors were dictating what they could and couldn't do. And they had to scale very, very quickly, which ultimately broke the business. So if you really want to maintain ownership and decide how fast and where you go, build in profitability quickly. Secondly, build an ecosystem around your brand. Now, this could be so many things, such as showing the behind the scenes of what it's like to build your company. This could be doing live speaking events and engagements. It could also be joining communities where your audience are, or even doing sponsorships if you have money. This all increases the visibility of your brand and also increases the number of touch points for people to really start to buy into what you're doing. Thirdly, take risks and really experiment. Now, I know that you've already taken a risk even starting this business as a first generation founder or leader, but you also need to take risks in the actual operations of your company. Experiment, try new things, test things in a controlled way, but make sure you're doing these things because there could be one lever that you identify that could absolutely exponentially grow your business. So don't slow down once you found a structure that's working. Continuously test things to see how you can increase the rate of growth. And lastly, how are you actually innovating in your business? And are you leveraging AI? We all know AI is the big thing right now. And yes, some people think it's a buzzword. Some people think that, it's a lot of hype. But people are really deploying these tools in their businesses and seeing real results. So take a look at your operations and look at, what are some of the pain points? Where are things inefficient in what you're doing currently? And how could AI actually help you to speed things up, deliver quicker, produce things better for your company? That's what you need to be thinking about right now. The speed of change and the speed of growth is exponential. So don't get left behind by doing the old way. So if you found this helpful, subscribe to First Gen and give this video a like.